questions.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm wondering about the dining area in the back is going to be partly on town land, and then the parking, which is alongside of the building, which is town-owned now, will remain parking, but part of the ownership of the burnt timber and whoever else is in that building.
All of the outdoor dining is effectively ceased as of November 1st. What hasn't been decided yet is what will become of the parking area adjacent to burnt timber. So it will be striped, but it will not be town property or town parking once the transfer is made.
What happens in the future if that wants to get reduced, or town wants to relocate the street access, the parking lot? We just recently had a charrette. There was some interest in connectivity and reconfiguration. I'm just wanting to make sure that
The property transfer does not get to the point of the street access to Laner Street. It stops well shy of that.
But it does change the frontage.
It does change the frontage, correct. In early discussions, there were one or two tenants in the burnt timber structure. Burnt timber is just a tenant in there. But there was consideration of moving the outdoor seating to the side of the building as opposed to the rear of the building. Many an instance where there are semi-trucks and other delivery vehicles parked in that land anyway. So it's an unsafe place for them to be sitting. So it'll be incumbent on the town at some point to consider revising the parking lot. But this does not remove options for parking in the parking lot.
And does the town not have easements for the sewer lines that are going through there?
Correct.
So what's the benefit?
There are no easements.
There are no easements.
Correct.
Madam Chair, one question for the planner. Does the town have any plans of changing the directional arrows on the parking lot? Make it one way in or one way out, or are we going to leave it both ways, in and out?
There are discussions about both options, but none of those are present this evening.
I understand. Question to the planner. It will be
When
reassuring to know that the town is thinking maybe of making it one way in or one way out, rather than the way it is now, which most people use it going in, few people use it going out, and those who do use it going out are usually looked at with daggers by those coming in, because there's oftentimes not very much room for the two cars to pass.
Agreed. I will say, for the benefit of the boundary line adjustment, this is probably the 8th iteration of property lines. In discussion between the Board of Selectmen and the property owner of Lot 9, there was a strong push from the Board of Selectmen to maintain at least a 30-foot aisle in the parking lot, which would suggest two-way travel.
Mm-hmm.
Every discussion I've been privy to has been a strong suggestion that it be marked in only.
But as long as it's being considered by the town. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think the predominant way for a long time was just in, and then a couple years ago they added the out to it, and I was surprised at that point. But clearly, like Mike says, you get a funny look when you're pulling out, and 'cause I think so many people were just familiar with just in there, and if you went out the Huck's Hoagies Road, you know, that's kind of like a loop now. So I would push for that, and I'm a little concerned about the setback at the backside. Is that legal?
The line has the slant that it does to maintain the required setback from the above-ground propane tank, and there are no structural setbacks in the C1.
Okay, then, any other questions? All right, I'd entertain a motion to approve this application.
Can we, Madam Chairwoman, can we go back to the motion for completeness? Call for a vote on that? We didn't.
No, sorry about that. Okay. Okay, can we vote on the application of completeness, where we haven't had a motion and didn't ask for a vote. So everybody in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Okay.
Be happy to make a motion to approve case number 2021-021, tax map 218-008 and 009 for a boundary line adjustment with the recommended conditions 1 through 3 as proposed by the planner.
Okay, motion has been made
Second.
and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, very good. The next application I need to step down from, and so Mike Hotter will take over.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. The next application is Eastern Lakes Housing Coalition, tax map 176-020-01A, case number 2021-22. There was a site visit held this afternoon at 4:30. Julie, could you remain appointed as a member and sit in for Brad
Yes, I will.
to recuse himself? Thank you.
I'll just go on record as recusing myself from this one also, Mike.
Okay, and Brad Harriman has recused himself from this application as well. Okay, I've read the project into the record. Julie has been appointed. I'd like to invite the applicant's agent to make the formal presentation.
Hello, good evening. I'm Matt Coughlin with Recon Trail Design. I submitted this application on behalf of the Eastern Lakes Region Housing. This is a proposed new trail, about 1,800 feet long. It will be non-motorized, multi-use, be a 5 to 6 foot wide gravel path, and it will be constructed on top of an existing sewer line mound. So this is all land that was previously disturbed when the housing development was put in. And it will require to pass through a designated wetland area and 2 small bridges over existing stream channels. We will be constructing this trail within the wetland buffer, but we will not be disturbing any existing wetlands. We'll stay confined to on top of the mound above the sewer line. So I don't perceive any new impacts to native wetlands, and I've stated that I will use the state's best management practices for working within the buffer area. So I think our primary impact would occur within the buffer to your wetlands, but again, on top of previously disturbed ground. I'm not sure what other information you'd like at this point, and happily answer any questions you may have.
Board members have questions?
Is there a way to protect privacy of the people at the Harriman Hill area? Because this does come up into the backyards. And is there a way to protect their privacy?
Yeah, a fence would do the work there. We're constrained to this corridor. There's really not many other feasible places to put the trail. So it does skirt the back perimeter of one of the yard areas, and a fence would provide that privacy. It does terminate into the corner of their parking lot.
A plan to maintain this into the future, as in various weeds, various plants may end up growing in on it?
Yep, I will provide an annual maintenance plan to the Housing Coalition, and I would make myself available to do that maintenance work. And it would require annual brush removal from the sides to maintain the corridor, and potentially adding some additional gravel several years down the road for any areas that may have settled, acted.
And these bridges that you're creating, they're not going to disturb the wetland, I assume?
No, the bridges will be installed above the banks, so they'll span the entire stream channel, and I will not disrupt anything below the banks. And I would also point you to the state's statutory permit by notice that has been approved.
Other questions from the board? Susan?
See this being used as a transportation, possibly for the folks that live in Harriman Hill in the
I think that'll be the primary use, is people traveling to and from the housing community, because it terminates on the parking lot and on 109A with no other, like scenic destinations. I don't think that people will go here to solely recreate, like ride a bike 1,800 feet just to turn around. So I think the primary use now will be for transportation and better connectivity for non-motorized uses.
lighting being proposed
No lighting is being proposed.
at this point.
At this point, it would require further excavation and probably burying power lines, which is something I don't do.
Considered in
Thank you.
Has any consideration been given to making this trail ADA accessible?
Yes, so the standards that we go by are accessibility standards that are set by the Forest Service for recreational type trails, which draw from the ADA and ABA specifications. So yes, we will build to those standards, but it's not exactly the same as building your sidewalks out here.
When you say that the trail is going to be non-motorized, you're not including in non-motorized, motorized wheelchairs and other equipment that the handicapped can use to get around that run on power, electrical power?
No, that would be acceptable. And again, ultimately, it's the determination of the landowner for what's permissible. But this would be open to people with disabilities that have some sort of motorized transportation device. When I say non-motorized, it would exclude things like ATVs and snowmobiles.
And the trail materials are gravel as opposed to stone dust?
It's going to be a mixture. It'll be a hard pack mixture.
It will be a hard pack.
It includes some stone dust.
Okay. One of the requirements of 175.10 and then 175.5, one of the principal requirements is to show that no other location on the site can be used in place of this site. This is the only one that's appropriate, given the more productive use of the land elsewhere. Can you speak to why the trail has been placed where it is currently?
Yeah, the two primary reasons are it's already an open corridor and building on top of ground that's already been disturbed. So it's actually the higher ground in that area as well. So there's no alternate routes through there because you'd end up in proper wetland areas, which would not be advisable to build anything in there.
And one last question. In your testimony in the beginning, you used the words, this trail had been part of a project approval previously considered. Can you speak to that?
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Perhaps the planner can speak to that?
I was originally approached by Kathy Barnard asking if Harriman Hill was required to install a trail. And when one goes through the planning board record, the planning board did not require a trail. However, a portion of that land was then put into conservation easement, and the conservation easement came with a clause that there was to be a trail connecting the residential areas to 109A. So that also adds into why the trail is located where it is. The trail has to provide continuity in the conservation land from the residential portion to 109A. And it's already disturbed.
Understood. Okay, thank you, Tavis. Any other questions?
Yeah. So the area that you're trying to improve and create this path on, are you adding any stabilization fabric to the bottom before you put the gravel on the top?
Yeah, so the construction method is to excavate the first 3 to 4 inches of soil to get the organic soils off of there. And then we put down a geotextile fabric for the full width. And then we add on up to at least 6 inches of hard pack material that then gets compacted. So that prevents mixing of the soils. It prevents additional vegetation growing up through the tread material. And then, like I said, minimal excavation. We really just want to get the organic soils.
Facilities, churches, and synagogues, it would be hard to make the same argument when you're discussing or when you're considering a private home where adults are resident and expect the ordinary vicissitudes of life to have to deal with, without expectations of particular protections that children, schools, recreational facilities, churches, and places of worship would assume. I would not be in favor of changing the language to include restriction to 250 feet from a residential
200 feet.
200 feet from a residence at this stage.
Well, that would be a residence in the dwelling, or in the zone.
Agreed.
And I think they
Right now, I
have
think
the same protection as people in zoning districts.
Well, they have the same protection to people in zoning districts. We accord special protections to special classes of people in zoning districts, like schools, and we have increased setbacks.
Okay, but not the dwelling units.
And established drug-free zones.
This
We don't have
is
the
something
same.
that I picked up from the previous ordinance and just thought that it was worth bringing to the board's attention
Yeah.
in the case of a dwelling unit in the particular zoning district we're talking about putting this in. So that's why I brought it to your attention.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, entertain a motion to move this particular item. I'm sorry. Excuse me. Oh, okay. I'm going to open the public hearing on this one. Go ahead.
I just think there needs to be one point of clarification on what was just addressed under number 2 there, where it says 500 feet of any of residential district. I interpreted it the first time as meaning any residential district, which would be a small r and a small d. But then I looked at it, and under the zoning ordinance, and most of the Pine Hill district is surrounded by the R residential zoning district. And I just think you need to clarify on which this is. I think there's a small part of the Pine Hill district that abuts the village residential zone. And I think based on the conversation, it would seem we're all talking about 500 feet of any residential district, not a particular zoning district.
little r, little d.
What was that?
Little r, little d
And take
was
out
the intent.
And take out the of.
They got the who?
The of. So it reads any residential district.
Yes, correct.
Yes, thank you. Take out the of. I didn't. Case R.
Okay. That
Other
solves the,
editorials.
well, that still doesn't solve the problem of a dwelling in the in Hill District, I think. But anyway, that's just me. Okay, any other people want, any other members of the public? Okay, I'll close the hearing, and anybody wants to make a motion or continue this?
Happy to move the amended text.
Second on the motion?
Second.
Okay, the motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed? I am opposed. I think that we really should be protecting things. Seem like a good addition.
Well, if it,
Okay, thank you. On to the next one. Amendment to lighting and illumination. Are you in favor of the adoption of amendment number 4 as proposed by the Planning Board for the Wolfeboro Planning and Zoning Ordinance to amend Chapter 175 of the zoning regulations, specifically general provisions, by amending 175-53(1), lighting and illumination, to clarify the language for permitting and project review? Go ahead, Tavis.
so as the board is aware, the lighting subcommittee made some recommendations on changing the lighting regulations in town, primarily those that applied to site plan review. The board then made the decision to move the residential components of that back into 175-53(1). In so doing, as you see on the first part, the definitions have been moved into 175. That moves down to paragraph B, which is essentially what has been in the lighting regulations all along with regard to single-family homes, or I should say non-site plan review projects. Clarified some of the language on lumens, hours of operation, downlighting, uplighting aspects. And this is where the board left off. Nothing to add.
Okay, under permit requirements, it says the building permit shall be required prior to the installation of any new fixtures. Is that residential as well as site plan?
Yes, anytime someone adds a fixture, you need an electrical permit.
Okay,
So that's the building permit, that's the trigger for someone to come in and review, and the town has the opportunity to look at downlighting and things of that sort.
okay, all right. Okay, the new installation of uplighting by any method is prohibited. Like up above in the first paragraph, it said uplighting is any method and is prohibited. So, I mean, is that kind of a duplication, or is this more of an explanation?
I think the second paragraph needs to come out.
It just seemed like it was saying.
I think it was omitted previously, and it didn't hold when it was deleted.
Okay, so,
So, number 1, general lighting requirements. All lighting in the town of Wolfeboro is required to have full cutoff shielding. Uplighting by any method is prohibited. However, the planning board may allow limited use of upward landscape lighting on the case-by-case basis, period. Skip down to existing lighting. That middle paragraph needs to go away. You're correct.
Being as how that's a redundancy,
Correct.
editorial change.
okay, and the control of glare. I mean, is this going to require an engineer, or how does this?
No, anytime you go to buy a light, it tells you what the lumens are.
Yeah, right, I understand that. But this is a new section, right? No, it's not a new section. Okay. Yeah, okay, all right. And so the 3 plus D3. Okay, all right, good. Oh, okay, and then there's a section 3 on residential lighting. And it doesn't, I mean, it almost seems to contradict the fact that you need a permit to upgrade your lighting. Just,
You need a permit to install lighting. But what this does is speak to people that, say you have 5 accent lights around the outside of your home. It was approved, and at the time of approval, it met the lighting regulation. You then decide you're going to go out and replace all of those 45-watt bulbs with LEDs. You're supposed to, this is the general lighting ethics, if you will. You're supposed to maintain that throughout.
yeah, okay. Okay, so it really isn't redundant.
No.
You need the permit anyway to start out with, and then these are just to cover existing. Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, I'll open the public hearing on this.
Come in before the meeting.
Under 3.1, it reads, residential lighting uses shall not be used or maintained in such a fashion as to inhibit or interfere with the use and enjoyment of neighboring properties after the hours of 11 p.m. Under the current ordinance, that ends after properties, and it doesn't allow you to interfere with your neighbor's use and enjoyment up until 11 p.m. And I'm wondering why that's being added.
It was added by the lighting, the subcommittee, because there are some that would have lighting that wasn't necessarily bothering their neighbors at 9 o'clock, but if an outside floodlight was on 24/7, that would be interfering or injurious. I thought you were going to go after the qualitative terms, but.
No, well, I don't think you should be able to inhibit your neighbor's use and enjoyment up until 11 o'clock. And then once you stop at 11 o'clock, when can you restart? Because there's no closing time, it just stops at 11 p.m.
I didn't read that as an invitation to inhibit or interfere with a neighbor.
I mean, to
Well,
be
if you
clear-
don't put an end on the period you can't inhibit, then when can you start?
But the point is, I don't think the assumption is that you don't start at all, but you certainly have to stop doing anything bad after.
Okay.
Turn the lights down, in other words.
So at
Well,
11
the point he's making is if I turn it off at 10:59, can they turn them back on at 11:01?
Right.
The question would be, should it be, you can, if you support the idea of being interfering or inhibiting your neighbor's enjoyment of the property, should, till 11 p.m., should it be, say, between the hours of 11 p.m. and 6 a.m.? And no, it doesn't account for daylight savings time.
It does, because it's a local time.
Okay,
I
thank
mean,
you.
Are we being a little too precise here?
What is the timing for the noise ordinance?
11.
11.
11 to
Normally,
7?
when you have one of these things, there's a starting date and an ending time.
I think the noise ordinance is 6:30 to 11, or 7
Just
to
match
11.
it.
Is there a time phase in the noise ordinance between certain hours, X and Y?
Yes,
There is.
I believe it's 7 to 11. Might be
11 to
6.
7.
Right.
11 to 7.
Okay.
11 to 7 quiet, 7 to 11 loud.
Okay.
So that would be 7 to 11 light, 11 to 7 dark. However, have to be, I agree with the context, putting an end time to the non-injurious period. What we haven't addressed is what inhibiting or interfering with the enjoyment is. Because when the committee looked into that, you actually had to show physical harm to the observer of the light. So it's not, oh jeepers, that light's annoying, it's damaging to oneself.
Shouldn't we also assume that the meaning is understood, that after 11 o'clock you turn your lights down? You don't really have to tell them after 6 a.m. to turn your lights down, because usually, at least except in the wintertime, say 7 a.m., the sun's up and lights are going to be overtaken by the sun.
Well, if, as Tavis says, you have to, it has to result in some harm, that seems, why do you want to permit that? If it's not causing any particular harm, then you can put some light on your neighbor's property. But if you're harming them, which is what the committee found out, why are you going to allow that?
Say that again? I couldn't understand you.
Well, what Tavis said was that when you looked at inhibiting or interfering the use and enjoyment, there has to be some physical harm.
Yes, you would have to
So
be...
why are you permitting someone to cause physical harm to their neighbor?
Because it's hard to differentiate the from the calculation method that was being used was not, you couldn't use the calculation method by going to somebody's property line and measuring the kelvins coming across to the property line. This was basically a clearer way to understand the ordinance, and basically it's not an extinction of it. It's basically, you know, under 2, you're allowed the provision of it's either 100% fully shielded or it's on motion. So the elimination is not there. It's basically, it's curbing it down to something that is dark sky compliant, which is really the golden rule that we're trying to achieve here.
So, and I think you need to look at 1 and 2 in unison.
Yes.
Because it's quite possible that there might be a arguably blinding light that comes on if an intruder comes into somebody's yard, but it's motion activated and or on a timer. What purportedly is happening in some neighborhoods is there are floodlights that are on and very bright all night long. So,
But what you're saying is it's largely unenforceable because you can't prove harm.
That's right.
it's basically a nuisance suit. Yes, it gives somebody something to hang on to and say, but Your Honor, the light was on at 1 a.m., which is back to Roger's original point. How soon after 11 p.m. can you turn the light back on?
So this is the best we can.
Isn't that,
Well,
isn't that the same issue you have with noise?
Yeah, it's essentially the same issue as noise. And in noise ordinance, noise is described as being unpleasant or disturbing. How do you qualify what disturbing or unpleasant noise is? It's really in the eye of the beholder. I think if I were to put myself in the position of a judge, I would read paragraph 1. I would say, what does the ordinary guy understand by what that's saying? Simply is, if you have lights on after 11 o'clock and they're a drag to the guy next door, you're supposed to turn them off. I think the meaning is clear.
Agreed.
But if you can't determine whether it's having any impact, why put this thing in there anyway?
Well, that's the same thing with the noise ordinance. How do you establish an unpleasant noise? I like rock music really loud. It's not unpleasant, Your Honor.
Well, the noise ordinance has other uniquities to it. It can be heard beyond the property line, which goes back to John's point. Is it 0.2 lumens at the property line? Well, you can be, I think as some members can attest, you can be at or below 0.2 lumens at a property line, but the simple fact that it's 0.2 at the property line, but on all night long, there comes the problem.
I think we're splitting so many hairs that the issue is now bald.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely, and really the bigger picture here, Roger, is dark sky. Across our country and our world, our skies are brightening up. What we're trying to do is we're trying to get control of that skylight and to get our insects, our bodies, and everything back to acclimate using one universal method that is easy to take care of.
Well, I think that's very commendable, but if you're doing that, why are you saying that, well, you can interfere with your neighbors with bright lights until 11 p.m.
That's a,
And
I
if
think
in
the
fact you
assumption is-
can't determine whether somebody's complying with this, why do you put it in there? Because it sort of suggests, well, we can turn all the lights till 11 o'clock.
I don't think it's inviting people to annoy their neighbors until 11 PM. It
think
gives
the
the neighbor
assumption is-
something to say. It's like, it's after 11 and it's still on, I'm going to say something.
Yeah, if the assumption is that before 11 o'clock, no matter how much of a drag it is, it's not inhibiting or interfering. After 11 o'clock, then it becomes something different.
And I'm going to suggest that the idea that the noise is off the property, I would suggest that in housing areas where houses are reasonably close together, an air conditioner in a window is going to be producing noise which goes across the boundary. It's not loud, and it shouldn't be annoying, but these are the things that you end up dealing with. And
But your loud and my loud and Vaughn's loud are
and the
different.
question
and
is,
that's where this
how many
goes.
lumens do you need to worry about? If it's like a night light, is that going to bother me? No, and it's the spotlight that does. So in many ways, it's common sense. It's being nice to your neighbor.
Okay, or do we want to change this or not? Okay. That's right. Okay, then any other comments? Okay, yep, close
Close the hearing?
close the hearing, and I'll entertain a motion to move this to the town warrant as presented to us.
As presented.
Okay,
I
okay.
beg pardon, no, as amended.
As
That paragraph,
amended,
you're saying, yeah.
right,
Paragraph paragraph number 1.
right, okay. All right, so Mike has made a motion to move this to the town warrant, and John seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. All right, the next one, amendment to the Pine Hill Road Development District. Are you in favor of the adoption of amendment number 5 as proposed by the planning board for the Wolfeboro Planning and Zoning Ordinance to amend Chapter 175 of the zoning regulations, specifically Pine Hill Road Development District, by deleting 175-96 and 96.1 in their entirety and replacing it with 175-96 permitted uses and special exceptions 175-96-1 to clarify the language for permitting and project review. Okay, Avis?
So the background on this, I was asked by the planning board to take all of the permitted uses and special exception uses out of the C2 district and move it into the Pine Hill district. Effectively, that is what's here with some minor rearrangement. In 175-96E, there is a strike through 3, which should be deleted. It has a strike through, it just for some reason showed up. That strike through 3 will not actually be on the warrant. For the board's recollection and memory, you'll note the changes from the last meeting with N, new and used car dealers, O, been separated out for auto repair and body shops and small engine repair shops. Fuel storage has been added as QD. Notes, the footnotes have been updated. Remainder of special exception uses remains. So again, this is the one I spoke to earlier. See under 175-96 1I, where sexually oriented businesses comes in as previously discussed and moved to warrant this evening.
Anything else?
No, that is it.
Okay,
For the record, yes, there is something else. As there is no official adopted zoning map, I'm not quite sure there is a C2 district, so it is very timely to take the uses out of it. it shows up on the unofficial zoning map, but I don't believe the description for the one parcel everyone in the room believes to be C2 actually exists anymore. Very good to make this change, my opinion.
Okay, and just one, and maybe this is me being over specific, but in contractor's yard light, that's less than 30,000 pounds of the vehicle. That's for the light, and then for the special exception, the contractor's yard, gross vehicle rating of more than 33,000 pounds. Should that be put in here? I mean, it's in the definition section.
And correct.
Is that
I believe
that
that's
enough?
most appropriate, yes.
That's all we need.
Yeah, okay, all right, just,
Madam Chair, I just want to go on record to recuse myself from this one, as I have in the past on this Pine Hill Road area up there, so.
okay, great. Okay, any other questions?
I checked that suggestions that we made on August 17 have been incorporated into this text.
Okay, and another thing that I noticed under M, conversion of structures existing as of March 10th, 1992 to a boarding, lodging, or bed and breakfast. We don't allow boarding, so can we just strike that?
Up to the board.
It's gotten past 4 planners,
No,
multiple
but I'm
iterations
really
of the planning
alert
board.
now.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Is that okay for everybody to take that out,
Yes,
since we
if-
don't allow them?
Prohibited use, it shouldn't have been in there in the first
Okay,
place.
all right. Okay, anything else? Okay, I'll open the public hearing on the Pine Hill Road Development District. Any member of the public that wants to?
So M remains, but with absent boarding, correct?
Yes, M
Yes,
remains absent
right,
of board boarding.
right, yeah. Okay,
Where storage appears in 175-96, there's a reference to Note 1, and it seems to me there should be a reference to Note 1 on 96.1C of storage of volatile fuels, so that they're set back 150 feet along with other storage facilities. Note 1 is storage facilities shall be set back 150 feet from all state-numbered highways, and the existing vegetation shall be preserved in said setback.
Interesting dialogue, but this board drew a very clear line between storage and volatile fuel storage.
Yep, and I think that's the difference. The difference is in 17596I, we're looking at storage facilities as a use, whereas in contractors' yards, light and heavy, we're looking at fuel storage areas within that use. And we're setting back in I, the use by 150 feet, but we're not requiring that in contractors' yards, heavy and light. Different uses have their own setback requirements.
You're not requiring that
I think
for...
it's a different question. I think it's 17596I has the footnote for the 150. 17691C does not require that same setback.
which I think is unfortunate. This is one of the gateways to the town. Do we really want them, having removed the oil storage facilities from behind the railroad station, do we now want to display them at 30 feet back from Route 109? I think where the Eastern Propane, that seems like a perfect place for that and working very well. But if you've got somebody storing oil or whatever, do you really want these big tanks sitting 33 feet back from the property line? One of the gateways to the town. I'm not objecting to them being there. I just think they should be set back and concealed.
A future work I would recommend considering is what storage of all the fuels is. That's an undefined term.
That's a different issue.
The board has taken it to mean gas stations, and what I would suggest is gas stations shouldn't necessarily be back 150 feet.
No, I would agree. No, but you permit gas stations, so if you permit gas stations,
this-
I think that means you can have gas there.
But this board drew a very clear distinction that storage of volatile fuels, in fact, meant filling. As opposed to.
But what about if you're storing diesel oil or heating oil? You're going to allow that 30 feet back?
Uniquely, diesel isn't a volatile fuel, but I digress. But Eastern Propane was held to that setback requirement. Originally, Pine Hill was the town's industrial park specifically set up for storage of volatile fuels and other things that people didn't want downtown. I raised an objection with the planning board as to why a zone that was created specifically for such a use now required that use for which the zone was required to have a special exception. But again, here it is. So storage of volatile fuels, garages, and filling service stations. I think the next iteration of this needs separation or the distinction between a gas station and a fuel storage depot. I would accept the comment that a fuel storage depot, such as Eastern Propane, and their tens of thousands of gallons of propane probably should have a setback, but a gas station would be ineffectual to have a 150-foot setback.
Point, Terrace. Good point. I point out 175-96.1A, light industry. Is that a strikeout in number 1?
Yes, it's a strikeout for the old one that was referring to the need for site plan review,
that's
which
what
is
it
redundant
is.
because
Okay.
everything
All right.
requires it.
Okay,
And would you, Madam Chairwoman, maybe we should put onto our 2022 work program an examination of 175-96-1C, maybe parse out setbacks for volatile fuels, garages, filling, and/or service stations.
Yeah, my suggestion is the board revisit storage as a concept and define
And throw that into the mix.
dry storage versus liquid versus fuels versus.
well, we do have an opportunity to change this now.
You could, if you wanted to make that move now, suggestion would be to remove the phrase storage of volatile fuels from 175-96-1. Have C simply read garages and filling or service stations.
And you are eliminating that use?
I would argue no, because storage of volatile fuels is not a defined use in the town of Wolfeboro, other than as the board laid out an intent.
Well, we ran into that problem with Eastern Propane, and that caused a difficulty.
Could we solve this by simply putting a little number 1 footnote behind volatile fuels and nowhere else?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it seems like we take out storage of volatile fuels.
You could add the superscript 1 after storage of volatile fuels to then trigger the setback, yes.
Yeah, but then the trouble is, what kind of storage of volatile fuels are we talking about? A 25-gallon tank or a 5,000-gallon tank?
That's
We-
my entire point, it's not defined. And this board,
Then I don't think at this point we should be messing with the language, because we're opening up a big can of worms if we do. I think we should put that on a work program and really get our teeth into it, make sure that what we craft out at the end is something that covers all the bases, as opposed to trying to do it now with a time constraint.
given there's been one application in the reasonably recognizable past of this entire town for a questionable storage of volatile fuels, I don't think it's going to hurt to go one more year.
Yeah, I think that I would be more comfortable if we had time to consider the ramifications. And Roger's point is a good point. We do need to be careful protecting the gateway into the town there. And I don't think we can do that tonight here, these conditions. So I would move this, when the public hearing is closed, I would move this to the warrant with the understanding that we're going to revisit some of the wording in that section in the future.
And keep storage of volatile fuels now.
We have to, otherwise we're going to run into another
Right, yeah,
problem.
okay. Okay,
Yes, this is like step 1 of 3 steps.
right.
Continue. next year.
Okay, anyone else want to comment? Okay, I'll close the public hearing. And
Move this article to the warrant with the emendations already noted, removing a superscript 3 in 17596E, word boarding in M, and superscript 1 in 17596-1A.
a motion has been made. Somebody want to second it?
Seconded.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed and abstentions. All right. Next definition, amendments to definitions.
Instead of reading it all, Madam Chair, if you'd like.
Yeah, right, yeah.
The question came up as far as noticing of the public hearing. It's my position that Article 7 was duly noticed for procedural purposes because one refers to the modifications to the lighting section. The other one includes the rewrite of the sexually oriented business. What Article 7 is doing is simply moving the terms that were in sexually oriented business in lighting back into 175 definitions. The definitions have not changed. They have not been amended, or otherwise moved. They are just coming from a non-numbered section of earlier sections of the ordinance, and this is where all definitions will reside moving forward.
Okay, and I mean, this, I had talked to Tavis about this earlier because the legal notice on definition, it says related to sexually oriented businesses. And so it seems your approach is that the definitions are here.
Well,
and they
it
show
is
up in the
because
lighting.
the earlier article with an amendment to lighting and illumination 175-53.1 includes therein in paragraph A the definitions moving to 175.
Okay,
So
everyone all right with moving ahead with this?
Yeah, I think the public was warned that the 175 is going to be dealt with tonight in one form or another, and those who were interested would be here. And in addition, we're on camera.
And so the other way to resolve it, if the board was concerned, would be to add a new Article 9, if you will, so that lighting had a move of words into 175, and sexually oriented businesses had a separate and discrete moving of words.
Right, and
To me, it's a bit cumbersome because people are going to wonder why one set of words is changing here and another set of words is changing over here.
if anybody reads this, I mean, here are the definitions all in the lighting area, all crossed out, and they're over in the definitions.
Correct.
Is everybody okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right,
We
any other?
talked before about, Vaughn suggested moving the definitions all to one
Yes,
area.
This is step one of that.
right, this
One
is
of
step
that.
one, that's what we talked about, was that we are trying to get all the definitions into 175.
Yeah, I think that should be,
Yeah,
So I think the public was notified that the two sections were changing. The article as written in number 7 includes all of those terms.
okay. All right, I'll open the public hearing on this one. Definitions? Questions? Okay, very good. I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion to move this one to the town warrant.
So moved.
Motion has been made.
Second.
Seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And abstentions? All right, very good. Okay, amendment to the Bay Street Limited Business District, the map amendment. Do
So
you have the map things for us? Okay, well, while he's passing that out, this is Article 8. Are you in favor of the adoption of Amendment Number 7 as proposed by the Planning Board for the Planning and Zoning Ordinance to amend 175 of the zoning regulations, district boundaries and descriptions, and Bay Street Limited Business District by amending to the district boundaries to clarify the language for permitting him project review as follows, and then it goes through all of this. You can take over.
Thanks. I'm not going to read it either, but I'm going to touch on a part of it. So one of the things that I would recommend the board put on its work plan for next year is adopting an official zoning map. By so doing, you avoid essentially a meets and bounds description of the zoning districts. I will tell you it becomes rather confusing until you get comfortable once you start going thence northeasterly along the southeastern boundary of parcels and turning north by northeasterly to a point of this and then turning. One of the reasons I think the zoning map is perhaps advisable direction is it became clear very specifically this afternoon, but in the process of doing this, I don't think many of the zoning district boundary descriptions have remained current with board actions. It also is a bit confusing when you look at the zoning map in the planning conference room that is often hailed as the zoning map that reflects changes to zoning that are not reflected in the district boundaries nor reflected on the online tax maps. However, the intent with this, and I gave you a quick mock-up of the area, the project that the Filterbed Road Subcommittee looked at was potentially rezoning the parcels along Filterbed Road. There was a discussion at that time of either extending the Pine Hill Road District or their uses down in that area or moving the Bay Street Limited Business District to incorporate those parcels. So with a collaborative effort between planning board members, subcommittee members, several business owners along the corridor, the decision was made to extend the Bay Street Limited Business District to include those parcels. So at the image in front of you, you have a before and after. That shows the current residential zone, and then on the right-hand image, you have these select parcels becoming red to reflect the Bay Street Limited Business District. One of the parcels that again came to my attention this afternoon as parcel 190-120. It is the right-hand uppermost red parcel. That one. Yep.
On the corner of Bay Street?
If one goes back several decades, that property was zoned C2. It's then very clear that there was discussion with the planning board about that parcel becoming Bay Street Limited Business District. It is the original storage unit lot of Wolfeboro. Property owner is here this evening and is the one who raised this question to me. The strikeout language the proposed text this evening inadvertently excludes that parcel, even though it shows red on the zoning layer. What I can find going back in the GIS records is somewhere around 2018, it became village residential. That's what shows on the zoning map in the conference room. So for fun this afternoon, the property owner and I went through 3 town annual reports, and I went through a couple of others earlier today, and I can find that the planning board never recommended, nor did the town ever vote to make that parcel village residential. So how the map was changed to reflect that, I don't know. It also, by definition, does not meet, according to the district boundaries, village residential is to those parcels served by water and sewer, which that parcel is not. So the one suggestion, and I don't believe this is significant, about 9 lines into the proposed text on sheet 19 of 20, we need to go to the, I need to insert that parcel, 190, 120, into that language. It was inadvertently omitted because the language above it is based on a change that was never actually voted on. So
Simply, okay.
you're not rezoning it or changing its zoning, you're actually correcting the record to adequately reflect the zoning of that parcel.
How
Show us
do you,
exactly where, Tavis.
What's that?
Show us where. In the text, where do you want it inserted?
Oh, it's, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 line down, you see 190-12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. That's where it starts walking up that line. And then we need to extend that up to include 190, 120. So it's going to be in the middle. It's going to be in between 17, see, and then it has 17, 18, 19, and 20. After that,
It says 17.
thence north along the eastern boundary of 17, 18, 19, and 20.
We're inserting and 20 after 19.
Correct. 19 will get moved over before the and then it will say comma and 20.
That's,
And then southwesterly, and that's where it turns the corner.
Okay, well, I mean, it seems that this is okay because the property is already zoned Bay Street, according to this map that you just gave us.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
and the property owner is aware of this and has
Yes.
agreed to this
Now,
and is in the room?
For some more information, storage is not a permitted use in the Bay Street Limited. It is in the Pine Street, or the Pine Hill Road. But it's over on lot coverage for Pine Hill Road. So I believe the applicant may be submitting a petition or requesting the board consider changing that zoning in the future to Pine Hill Road so that the use is permitted, even though its existing condition is over on coverage. But that's not something for the board to discuss tonight. That's something for the applicant and perhaps, or the property owner. The property owner and I to discuss options for moving forward.
so when you were researching this, you found that at one point it was in Bay Street and not in Pine Hill?
It went from C2 to Bay Street Limited. And the discussion at that time was, if I go Bay Street, the use is non-conforming, but I can add 25% to a non-conforming, or I could be in Pine Hill, but then I can't add anything because I'm over on lot coverage. So I think there's a number of things in both zones that don't quite work.
Let's solve the problem that we're faced with right now and getting it into the proper zone, getting it into
Correct.
the street. All right, could the property owner
Okay.
come to the microphone?
Yes.
Once you get to the
we're gonna
public,
open
yeah.
the public hearing once the conversations. Okay.
That's all I had.
Is everybody all set? Okay, I'll open the public hearing on this. If you'd like to speak, now's your opportunity to do so.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris Pongretson, and the owner of the property in discussion. I just wanted to point out that Tavis, I think you misspoke. We referred to it as 190 lot 120. It's 190 lot 20.
Oh, yeah, I have it written as 20, but I may have said, okay.
You said 120, I think, a couple of times. So I was just concerned that we get that right. But that's all. Thank you.
Oh, okay, all right, thank you. Okay, anyone else want to speak to this issue? Okay. All right, then I'd entertain well, is everybody comfortable with moving ahead with this since it shows on the map?
Have we closed the public hearing?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we're rectifying a mistake. And the property owner is here and in favor of the rectification. And we are aware that there will be a subsequent rectification of some sort that doesn't affect the current proceedings.
Okay.
So aside from this article, what about the map in the conference room? Are we going to upgrade that thing? Or do we have money to, or what's the story?
I know who made the map. I don't know what information was used. I don't know if there was any fact-checking after that.
Should we get rid of it so it doesn't confuse people, or what's, I mean,
I think it's a good reference point. It's a reminder to me to make sure I look at everything very thoroughly and not take the map at face value. I have a feeling that's been an issue for quite some time. There are other issues with that map, but it's a helpful quick reference.
Can we work on updating?
We can work on updating the map. I don't know if we have the ability to get an official zoning map ready for a warrant article vote this year. But yes,
Yeah, I doubt that we do. It took a long time to
Correct.
get the one that we have. It was updated. Okay.
I can get an updated print, yes, but the message to the viewing public, listening public, everything, the online zoning map is a suggestion, not gospel. The printed maps are not adopted as official maps. They're a guide, not the final word. We will get there.
Okay, all right, so the public hearing is closed, and I entertain a motion to move this to the town warrant in 2022.
So moved.
Seconded.
And seconded,
As amended.
as amended. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. All right. That's it.
I didn't.
Okay. No, we don't
None.
have minutes. Okay, the discussion items. Tavis, you wanted to add one?
Not done yet.
I wanted to add one.
Yes. The one that we talked about that's going to the Board of Selectmen.
Oh, sorry. There is a property owner on North Line Road, just past the wastewater treatment plant. Water plant, sorry. He has requested a waiver from the Board of Selectmen to allow building on a Class 6 roadway. The way the process works is the Board of Selectmen received the request, the planning board is then provided the opportunity to comment, and those comments are then passed back up to the Board of Selectmen, who will consider granting the waiver. The project, as I understand it at this point, is simply an extension of the MED electric lines and related poles at the applicant's expense to their property so that they can exist without a generator. That is the source of the waiver request. However, once the waiver is granted, the property owner would be able to build and use the property like a residential property, even though there are no immediate plans to do so. So the property is 400 feet from the end of a Class 5 road, or the Class 5 portion of North Line Road. A short stretch of passable Class 6 road, and once you get past this property, it is full of some of the largest boulders I've ever seen in a roadway. It's effectively impassable. From a planning perspective, I don't have any suggestions for the planning board. There's a reason not just that the selectmen not grant the waiver, but it is the planning board's opportunity to comment on development on a Class 6 road. Structure that's there now, politely put, is a 3-season structure at best. It is very small, about 12 by 20 maybe. It does have an existing foundation under it. They are pursuing getting a septic plan, having a septic system installed. There's a well on the property.
Natural Resources Committee, Master Plan, and recommending absolutely no development on Class 6 roads against that policy, against what the master plan approved, indicated. Maybe a small change, but when you have a small change, a slightly larger change next in line, therefore something which I would very much oppose against what the master plan is.
Also a memo from the Board of Selectmen that we had a few years back that said development on Class 6 roads, I recall.
But is this really development or is it already existing?
Say that again?
Is this developing because it's already existing? And the way I understand it, it's existed for a very long time.
I think that's kind of a key here, is the fact that there's an existing camp there now, and their wish is to simply get power into it to make it, as these folks are getting older, to have electricity there rather than have to run a generator whenever they come up to it to stay there. Obviously, they run the well, and I don't know if I don't know off the top of my head if it's septic has a pump system in it or not, or if it's gravity feed. I really don't know. It was more to update the camp a little bit to make it a little more livable for them right now. That's all that's in front of us. I think that factor we have to consider, because it's not just taking a raw piece of land and going for a building permit to build something on an empty piece of land on a Class 6 road. This is something that's already existing there that they want to do a small improvement on. And yes, it does open up possibilities and stuff, but that's obviously, that's not in front of us right now. So
I mean, I'm happy to put together comments from the planning board to the Board of Selectmen. Remind them of what the master plan says and what their memo said.
I think we have to, sorry.
Well,
We don't have any town regulation against it. It's
No,
statute.
but the master plan, in addition to the national natural resources also, it's in the future land use chapter, so.
So I would remind the board that the master plan is not a regulating document. The controlling aspect in this point is the statute 674-41.
And that
I'm happy to add the comments from the master plan to the selectmen suggesting, look, there's a reason behind 674-41, and it's furthered by the master plan, so please consider that in consideration of the waiver.
Could it be for this existing house only?
The waiver would go to the property.
It goes with the property.
Yeah, and the statute provides a mechanism for appeal. Can't close that out by saying no further permits on this particular Class 6 road, only this one and no further.
Yeah, okay.
You can't do that. And I'd also ask the board to remember, North Line Road, when did it become a Class 6 road? I think that I have a memory of driving North Line Road right the way to Federal Corners Road, that it had been closed up since I got here. That's not all that long ago. And I think it was closed up deliberately to stop it from being a through road. So it's not as if it's, quote, a naturally occurring Class 6 road that just fell out of use because nobody lived there anymore and it became a rocky place. Those boulders that are put there were put there specifically to stop anybody going any further.
Or providing an adequate challenge to traversing. But yes.
Or an adequate challenge to try to go around them. But the point is that in this particular case, North Line Road as a Class 6 road is sort of an artificial, in my opinion, Class 6 road created by the town to stop throughput, through traffic. I think
and it's interesting.
blanket prohibition on Class 6 roads in the master plan is a good idea and it's well-intentioned, but it cannot trump a state statute, which allows for development on the selectmen.
Interestingly, immediately past this cabin is where the police department has a gun range, what have you. So it really
travel there every
becomes a little debatable on where that Class 6 line is to me, because clearly the town has to maintain that road to get them past the property, so if you've done any maintenance, is it not in fact a 5? But I digress. At this point, it was suggested they pursue the waiver solely for the purposes of putting in the utility poles.
Okay, my question then would be, is the town actually maintaining that road for the pistol range?
I have not acquired.
Because if they are, Class 6 roads are not maintained.
Correct.
And therefore, if the town is actually de facto maintaining it so people can get there, then
It's not
really is not a Class 6 road.
Was North Line Road ever officially discontinued? Would turn it into a Class 6 road?
What makes it a Class 6 road is you drive past the water plant, there's a sign that says Class 6 road. That's not what technically makes it a Class 6 road, but that's where the sign is. That's what's driving this.
Was the road officially discontinued by the town?
I don't know that, Mike. I do know that one of the requirements to become a Class 6 road is for a period, I believe it's a period of 5 years of no maintenance being done on the road. Is one of the requirements for it to become, or just to be a Class 6 road.
Okay.
And also, I would just want to point out too, I believe that, as Tavis said, and correct me if I'm wrong, this application right now is just for a permit to run the power in. The applicant or the lot owner would have to come in for a electrical permit, I believe, to do any electrical work in the cabin.
And that's the reason behind the waiver. The town doesn't need a waiver to install utility poles in the right-of-way, but 674-41 precludes you from pulling the electrical permit to connect to the power, because you're not allowed to issue a building permit.
Yeah, okay.
So that's what's driving the whole waiver. Unfortunately, you can't say we're going to grant you a waiver solely for an electrical permit and nothing else. The waiver allows you to build on the parcel.
Okay, so for the purposes of what we're trying to do tonight, we need to send a note back to the selectmen, right?
So what
Okay, but can we include the fact that the master plan does have 2 chapters where it actually prohibits development? I mean, I think it's important to pass that on to them, so.
And if I can find the selectman memo suggesting the same, I'll remind them of that. I don't know where to look for that memo, but between the master plan and that, there is a history of not permitting Class 6 development, yes.
Not recommending. Master plans can't permit, but can only recommend.
Okay, so.
So I'm willing to put together a memo to that effect in the morning.
Okay.
Sign it, or we can represent it tomorrow when we're at the meeting.
Yeah, okay. All right, very good.
We also do have a representative who has been privy to this conversation.
Yes.
Yes, right.
Technically, the board is to provide written comment to the selectmen for their perusal.
Is that okay with you?
Yep.
John, do you?
I think that property is a historical property out there that, if I'm not mistaken, that was a stagecoach road to Portland, Maine.
Yeah.
At one time.
A long way to get there now.
Roundabout.
On your mountain bike.
Okay, so,
Might really ask if it's a Class 5.
do you want, I think we probably need a motion then.
So a motion to direct the planner to synthesize the planning board's comments for distribution.
Right.
Selectmen.
Okay, so I'll make that motion.
Seconded.
Okay, so the motion has been made and seconded.
Time for discussion?
Okay, yep.
Your synthesis indicate that at least one board member felt in this particular instance the board's disinterest in this permit is not unanimous.
Disinterest in the memo or disinterest in the waiver?
Disinterested in the substance of the memo. The board, one member does not agree with the other members of the board.
2.
This particular case on this particular Class 6 road.
2.
Two. Two members.
Okay, well, what are we,
So the memo was going to say something to the effect of, Dear Board of Selectmen, the planning board reviewed the proposed waiver application for tax map this and this on North Line Road.
The majority.
The majority of the board
Yeah.
discussed and wanted comments related to master plan chapter X and Y, along with a recollection of a prior Board of Selectmen memorandum, all of which suggest no further development on Class 6 roads. At least two members of the board disagreed with the generation of these comments for you to consider, but in totality, this represents the commentary for the planning board. Consider the application for waiver, 7441.
okay?
Sorry, Terry, I'll try and say it that way tomorrow.
Okay, so there's been a motion made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'll abstain.
One abstention. Okay, so
You've been so advised.
that vote was unanimous then.
Unanimous vote for the memo.
Yeah,
Not unanimous.
yeah.
As long as the select board knows we've had
Yeah,
discussion,
right.
they're going to make their decision,
Mm-hmm, great.
have our input.
Okay. Okay, just one other item. I need to bring you up to date on the short-term rental thing. Okay, we had a meeting October 18th, and the committee decided that we needed to go through the actual purpose statement for the generation of the committee. So we considered the purpose for the committee. We decided that we need to differentiate between short-term and long-term rental. This was discussed by the committee. It was determined that a maximum of 31 days seemed to make sense. The majority of the committee agreed with this statement, with one member not in favor. To determine the impact. Yes, I'm sorry.
Maximum for a short-term rental is 31.
Yes. Well, these are referrals. These we're reporting back to the planning board. Let's see, the impact short-term rentals may have on the town government, the community, and property owner. It was agreed that there didn't seem to be a problem based on the meeting with the town officials. The community seemed to thrive over the summer with many tourists. Meetings with the property owners were very split, some in favor of short-term rentals and some saying we need to get rid of them. But that it pretty much, I think, was in both directions. Others mentioned that they rent their properties in the summer to help pay the tax. As to the determination this leads to commercialization of residential neighborhoods, the committee agreed that the memo from our attorney indicated that a residential property owners have a right to rent their residential properties. There's nothing in our ordinance that prohibits that. There was a member that did not agree with this statement and felt it did lead to commercialization of the neighborhood. Has the integrity of the zoning ordinance been upheld? We allow bed and breakfasts are allowed in many residential zones. Boarding houses are not. Inns and motels are allowed in commercial zones, and some pre-exist the ordinance. And dormitories are allowed in the VR. It seems that the regulations are in place and should be followed. It was mentioned that all complaints are investigating and that there are many obstacles in doing this. The issue of the need for people to follow the fire code is important and does not seem to be in place. It was stated that due to the split of the committee in the it was difficult to make any progress. So, let's see. Tavis then mentioned he'd talked to the attorney, who said this is a land use issue and it is difficult to enforce. The attorney also mentioned that if someone has done this in the past, no enforcement can be taken against the property owner. It was mentioned that grandfathering is difficult to prove, and there is no sunset provision for this. Tavis also mentioned that the police are using their enforcement techniques in the best interest of the town. The committee agreed that Wolfeboro has a housing issue, and this is an issue that requires some attention by the town officials. And then it was further agreed that the committee needs to disband until we have a better idea of how some of the approaches taken by other communities are working for them. So then John and I received another issue about freedom, and they're seeking to limit short-term rentals. So there are several. We can see how it works out. So that's the report. Committee members have anything to?
Yeah, the freedom one was they wanted to limit to renting 45 days a year. And to Peter's question, the 31 days, that was based on the state of New Hampshire rooms and meals tax basis. How we came up with that.
Right. So it's back here to the planning board. And we don't have to make a decision. I was just letting you know. I think I sent you all the minutes.
On hold.
It's sort of now up to the planning board to, if they think we should do anything. Anyway, that's my report. Anybody?
I'll just jump in really briefly. I don't mean to keep the board any later than we've already gotten. Kearsarge Lighting District up in Conway has just one case and had another case dismissed against it. Zoning prohibits short-term rentals. Superior Court, Carroll County, has found in their favor that their zoning ordinance, although it was written when there was no planning board, still nonetheless prevails, and that one particular short-term rental owner fails in his motion. The district's prohibition overturned. So clearly there's a move in courts to look at this issue and find in favor of towns that have already defined what a short-term rental is and prohibited that.
Okay, anybody else? I don't know if we should put this on the agenda again for another discussion.
That's up to the board. I didn't hear anything come out of the short-term rental committee that would put this on the front burner for me anytime prior to March.
Okay, well, there's a lot of interest out there in the community, so as I think some folks think we should be taking some action, but basically what we got into was the fact that to put something in place would take a lot of staff time and everything in order to.
It would be, going back a couple of short-term rental committees, it would be very simple to make an amendment to the definition of dwelling to not include transient, put in a definition of transient.
Right.
One and done warrant article. The problem then becomes we have no enumeration of who has established short-term rentals prior to that law passing. What becomes difficult with the enforcement is proving that someone didn't have it prior to.
Right. So we could move ahead this year with the addition of transient.
We can come up with a definition of transient. I would recommend we get strong legal counsel as to whether we look at 185 days, 35 days, 50 days, 12 days, et cetera.
Why is a grandfathering issue?
Because
Everybody who's got one right now is right in.
the current definition of dwelling does not preclude short-term.
Yeah, that's the problem. I would strongly suggest, let me just point this out. There are a number of court cases going through Carroll County Superior Court right now around the issue of what towns can do to regulate short-term rentals. And let them pay for their lawyers and let them fight it out in the court cases. And when the courts have come up with a bundle of legal doctrines that discuss short-term rentals, let's have our lawyer look at them and drag out whatever is useful that we can use to regulate, if that's what this board thinks we should do, short-term rentals.
Well, in the meantime, this board has been looking at how to address the workforce, elderly, affordable housing angle. And it's very clear from the already exhausted Portsmouth case that if the board were to look at allowing workforce, affordable, or elderly housing with density bonuses, if it were clear to preclude transient uses similar to hotels, motels, et cetera, that is conclusive enough for the board to put that restriction on, so that you don't allow the density, whether it be short, a 10-year period, or forever for an affordable housing project, that then a once affordable housing project that all became a hotel via short-term rentals.
As long as we keep the two issues separate, then the principal focus should be on solving as best we can the housing shortage issue here in town, and realize that everybody currently who's running a short-term rental is grandfathered in no matter what we say subsequently.
Okay.
Like shutting the barn door when the horse is gone.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but the new horses that will be allowed in with a density bonus can be reserved for long-term rental, so that we can solve the housing problem that we have for people who can't afford.
Yeah, going forward, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's not completely out of the barn, it's a new area.
Well, they're not,
Correct, but I think, one of the obstacles Wolfeboro has going for it is plastered on the major entrances to town. It's the oldest vacation town. But all but suggest transient.
Okay, all right, so it seems the consensus is to hold tight, get more information, and continue the discussion next year.
And
Yeah, right, yes.
craft something.
Yeah, which is what we're doing.
And I think that it should be emphasized that we're trying to make a policy which is legal and fair to want to rent and are the renters.
And if that's going to happen, find transient now.
I think transient needs to be defined, but the working stiff case was very clear. It precluded transient uses, but not limited to hotels, motels.
Do whatever we want. Transient, but find transient so that we.
The reason I picked that one is that's already been to court, and
Yeah, but the only reason that prevailed was because with the word transient, that was the language. Plaintiff, court found, already included the word rental. In that case, this doesn't really address the wider issue of short rentals. Cases that are coming out of Carroll County right now are. Your ordinance says no STRs. Someone comes along and wants to put an STR in and contests it, they're going to lose.
I think a definition of transient needs to happen, but more.
I wouldn't hang my prohibition on STRs on the language transient.
I agree.
We want to have it more specific, no STRs.
And it's two separate, I agree, it's two separate conversations.
Yeah.
Short-term rentals and housing shortage. So if we want the housing problem solved, possibly increase allowed density to whatever number we decide on here in town. I think that transient allowed, want to not allow it. It's new. Density bonus areas, we can separate it out.
So at the next work session, suggested I come back, the previous work session, discussion about the C1 district and potential changes to the density. A lot of discussion about limiting short-term transient, whatever you call it, existing housing stock, et cetera. So at the next work session, I will have added to that discussion some additional pieces for the board to consider, should we want to move forward with that.
Okay. All right, that sounds like a good plan. Did you want to say anything about the charrette?
I do. Thank you to all that were able to attend. I understand why some couldn't. It was a very good exercise. All I'm going to say tonight is that the PowerPoint that was presented at the charrette is on the planning board page and the heritage page if you want to go through it. Pleasure. There are lots of things to come up. I will tacitly pat myself on the back. Many at the charrette that believe 30 acres is exactly the direction that district should be going. That came out a couple of different ways in the brochure, so it was helpful to have some reinforcement that way. But to that end, they were primarily focused on de-emphasizing auto-centric design, including, improving bike and pedestrian connections, multimodal connections to downtown, specifically between the project area of Laner Street and downtown, but also throughout downtown. So everyone loved the town, everyone loved the building they were in, everyone was very complimentary to everyone that helped organize and pull this off, getting the report, I believe, by the end of the year. That might help set the stage for next steps for the plan. A lot of consistency between, I don't think any of the 21, this is the largest charrette plan New Hampshire's ever done. There were 21 participants that came with their team. I don't think any of them necessarily read the master plan, but all of the things they pulled out are consistent with them. Yes, there are some practical difficulties. There was lots of groaning in various town departments about, well, we can't do any of that. It might look great on paper. I think it will be helpful to planning board to say, look, this can be done, because the report not only says here's a pretty picture, but it outlines how other communities have been able to implement it. So it really does lay out a storybook on how you get here to there. I believe so.
And the Heritage Commission will be discussing the charrette at the next meeting, which is on the 15th.
Yes.
Okay. So, no minutes.
I would, yes. I'll bring minutes back at the next meeting.
All right, so
I have
entertain a motion.
one question.
Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me.
Right. Just a question. Is this the only board that meets at 7 o'clock? Does every other board in Wolfeboro meet at 6:30 in the evening?
I know the selectmen,
I believe planning and zoning boards are the only ones.
Just a question that maybe we should slide up to 6:30 like everybody else, and then we wouldn't be stuck like this. Something to think about. I don't know what process we have to go through to make it move, but it does make sense.
The calendar has been set, the calendar you voted on this time last year set the calendar. Very easy to go into the town calendar and move everything up to 6:30.
Just a thought.
I'd be happy.
January 1st would be a nice time to do it.
right. For what time?
Don't they meet during the day sometimes?
Yeah, I think that's later in the year.
So if the board's interested in that, I can look into it and see if there's any conflicts for the rest of this year.
Okay,
And otherwise, we can look at doing that as a new rule moving forward.
In the summertime, that's when I'm out working. By the time I get home and clean up and get here, that works good for me, 7 o'clock, sorry.
Can we do a seasonal schedule?
Oh, now you're getting fancy.
I think you need to pick a schedule.
City life.
It's food for thought, just because we seem to go late,
Yeah, I know.
you know?
You talk too much.
oh, okay, but You know, generally, we usually finish at 9. I mean, we start at 7 and finish at 9.
I mean, other things the board can, it's difficult on a night like tonight where there were 4 public hearings, but the board can also have a practice of saying, I'm not going to get into discussion items or other things if it's already X time.
Right. Yes, that's true. We could do that. Oh, okay. All right, but, I mean, 9 o'clock is okay, isn't it?
I stay up till 1:30. I'm just saying, in general, and for other people that were here, you know, they were here
Yeah,
at 6:35, waiting
yeah.
patiently. They were ready to go, you know?
I mean, I think we could politely request that the chair or the co-chair limit the meeting to 9 o'clock. Closing time.
Yeah, where that,
As a point of contrast, I remember in the early 2000s, we would be at it until 11 o'clock at night.
Yes, I remember some of those sitting in the audience, waiting for my turn and having to wait till next month.
yes, zoning board has opened hearings at 11:30, so it,
Zoning board days, we would be at.
Okay, all right.
with that.
Late enough already, right?
Somebody make a motion to adjourn, and second,
Seconded by Peter.
and all in favor?
Aye.
Who motioned?
Mike
Any name,
and
want to
Peter.
write down.